Um, so, John Gallina, welcome to the Appetite for Discussion podcast. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you. Well, I'm hungry and ready for it.
That's excellent. Well, I don't know if food we have, but we definitely have coffee. Do you like some coffee?
That's right. Man, I love coffee.
All right. Well,
Couple of cups a day, but I'll forewarn you, you might not be able to stand me. And I might start talking a little bit faster if I have a little too much. I've already had 3 cups this morning.
Well, that means you are a cup and a half ahead of me, sir.
All right.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Also, I have some water too for us if you need that.
Oh, thank you.
But no, I appreciate you coming on. You got a lot of stuff going on. You know, you're a father, husband, CEO, and you're a pretty busy guy.
I do stay busy. As I like to tell people, it keeps me out of trouble.
So even though you're so busy, you decided that you're trying to make a run for the North Carolina House. Is that correct?
That's right. Really, Brandon, I've spent a lifetime serving North Carolina and serving the people of Iredell County, and most recently, as most people know me as CEO and co-founder of Purple Heart Homes, I've been serving the veteran community, and I see a lot of people that are not veterans that live here in our community that they're hurting and they're in need, and they may not feel that they have representation that is caring or concerning about their issues, and so we want to make sure that everybody has equal representation, and that all of our community, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, they're all taxpayers, and they all deserve to have representation that's willing to serve them and fight for them and stand up for what they believe and what they're looking for.
So is that your why? Because that was the one question I was going to ask you. Was like, why in the world would you want to do this? Because from the outside looking in, it looks like it's, number one, it's very daunting. It takes a lot of your time, and it seems like it could get, I don't know how, it seems like it even could get messy, especially as we get closer to election day.
Brandon, those are all excellent points, and I would say that it's only part of my why. Right.
Okay.
Another part of my why is that, after my time in Iraq in 2004 and helping hold the first free elections in truly an oppressed nation with a dictator, I come to realize that freedom is about choice. It's about a choice in where you worship. It's about a choice in where you live. It's about a choice in what you eat. And it's about a choice in who you get to vote for and who represents you. And I believe that, by and large, if people don't go vote and they don't go exercise that freedom and that choice, then they don't have much room to complain about who we have in office. But on the flip side of that, when our representative becomes appointed, and the people haven't had a choice, and the representative's never been challenged at the ballot box, then there's a whole different issue. And that's the case in what we have here in the North Carolina 84th House District. And so we've not had a choice in a representative in the last 20 years.
Okay.
And so providing the people that choice is something that's critical and important to me and my value system, based on what I believe the Constitution is about, what it means, and further than that, what the Revolutionary War was about. And by and large, we hear this thought about taxation without representation, but it was really a little bit more to that. And the 1700s, the British were essentially saying, you have representation. We've appointed you somebody to represent you, even though you've never met them. They live here, and we've appointed them for you. And so that belief of those early colonists saying, no, we should get to pick from among us who represents us. We are those that are paying taxes. We should get to select who is going to represent us. And so that is really, truly what, freedom meant to those early colonists. And that's what we fought for. And that's what I believe still should exist today.
It's interesting because there's a lot of folks who believe the higher up the food chain you get in politics, like with your representatives, you don't see them. Like they ran, right? You see them when it's time to run and get reelected, and then you don't see them again. But for you, folks around here can see you. You're actually a person you can touch, you can see,
Yeah.
you can talk to. I want to go back a second. You mentioned something that we haven't had a choice in 20 years. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so essentially, on the Republican ticket, Iredell County, even though we have a very large, uh, voter population that are registered independents,
Mm-hmm.
they still tend to vote more on the conservative party side. And so, with that being said, unless there is a conservative challenger in the primary, there's not a choice. And so, a lot of people want to look at our race and they want to say, oh, well, this should be decided in November. Well, that's not really true. This was a primary race, and whoever wins the primary has a 99% likelihood to be the victor in the general election.
Okay.
That's just the way that the county politics have went for the better part of the last 60 years.
Gotcha.
And so the primary race is one that is very contentious and very, very important for Iredell County. And so that's where I say we've not had a Republican challenger in the last 20 years. There's certainly been Democrat challengers,
Mm-hmm.
and that have been a part of the election process. But when we really talk about who's going to go to Raleigh, it's going to end up being a Republican off of the Iredell County ticket.
So what is it you think that there hasn't been any challengers? What do you think's been the drawback?
Well, I think there's some things that you alluded to. Number one, the amount of time, the amount of money, the stress. It's extra work for very, very small pay. It's a $13,900 a year job, and essentially it's 14 weeks in Raleigh for about 4 days a week to do the job. But beyond that, I think, so many people see politics today that it's very messy.
Yes.
And it gets very and politics are personal. I'll back up a little bit and let's talk about where politics come from. Then we can talk about why it becomes messy.
True.
And so your politics are connected to your morals, and your morals are developed in your childhood, in your early development years. Not that they can't change, through your teens and your early adulthood, but this idea of where politics come from and how ultimately what determines where we're going to fall in party lines, or how we're going to vote, or how we see certain issues. Nobody is all left on all issues and all right on all issues, right? There's a mixture on varying issues, and everybody finds that place, but it's all connected to your childhood. So when I start talking politics with you, it immediately becomes very personal, because it challenges your core beliefs and what you believe is right, wrong, or indifferent. And so with that, we get into these discussions, and then you get into these political races, and people suddenly become very divisive, right? And they start being willing to fight with a vehement passion that is just, you're telling me I'm wrong at my core, and that in itself is wrong. So I'm gonna sling mud in order to make sure that I'm the victor, right?
Yeah,
And so that's how
win.
people think, right? And that's why they call it a race. It's who's going to win, right? I don't view it that way. And so, my experiences, going into Iraq and as a combat soldier and a combat wounded veteran, my experiences really forced me to look within myself to determine, what my morality is, right? And what my core beliefs are. And at the very base root of all of that, I've come to understand that how we treat people matters. And so even in the sense of a race, I'm not going to sit here and bash my opponent, because my core tells me that that's not who I want to be. That's not how I was raised. And a part of the challenge with post-traumatic stress is really a moral injury. So again, it goes back to your childhood and your morals. So how you're raised and what you believe is right and wrong and good and bad, and then you go into combat and then you see all that is bad and wrong with the world. And now you've got to reconcile how you were raised with what you've now experienced. And so through that process and through the reconciliation and the reintegration, I have again, found this place where there are bad characters and bad actors in the world.
Mm-hmm.
However, I can choose not to be like them. I can choose to do something different. And I can acknowledge that they are there and present, but I get to choose who I am and how I act. And I believe that, as God told us, the greatest commandments to love God with all your heart and mind and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's hard for people to do. But I believe we need that in politics too.
Well, yeah, and that is a massive uphill battle. But man, good for you for taking the high road. It seems like, especially on the national elections, that's not what's happened. You see everything in the news that's going on, and the sad thing is you don't really know what to trust anymore. I've really stopped listening to more mainstream news, and I go more independent outlets. I feel like I get more true information, and then I can go kind of look around. But I think where a lot of folks, and you tell me if I'm wrong in my thinking, but I think a lot of folks really focus on the presidential election, and that's obviously that's important. However, your local elections, your mayor, your city council, your representative, that's really where we should be focusing, and not so much what's going on up here. I feel like this is really a big distraction. And this is what we really need to be focusing on, what really impacts us in your hometown.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, Brandon, and just what I'll say is that the presidential election is very important, but in so many ways, you think about leadership in this sense of decision making, but really what leadership is doing is leadership is setting the tone and the culture, right? And so the president is important in that sense that they kind of set the tone and the culture that then disseminates through policy, right? And then national policy starts to influence state policy, and so those policies, in many ways take some time to reach the people, right, and have true impact in the people. But with that, ultimately, it impacts our taxes, and it impacts our ability to earn wages, and it impacts, our safety, right, and what we're seeing at the border, right, what we're seeing with international affairs and conflicts and wars, and how all these things are unfolding. So it is important. But I believe one of the things that's been lost, and particularly in the Republican Party over the last couple of decades, is this idea that it used to be that the Republican Party was small government, right? They were for smaller government. And it seems to me that the Republican Party has really lost sight of that, and it's all about bigger government now, and it's growing the government. And so I believe that state rights are critical and important to us. And I believe that ultimately the closer that politicians are to the people, the more the people can hold to pick this up.
You were talking about North Carolina, or the Republicans Party has gotten
it's moved away from big government, or it's moved towards big government. And so basically, one of the things that I think is most critical and important for people to understand is that not only that the closer that our politicians are to the people, the more that they can hold them accountable, but really the power, I believe, needs to be brought back down to the people, whether that's in the state or in the county, that those decision-making, opportunities to be able to guide where we want to go needs to be as close to the people as possible. And I believe that gives the people the engagement that they need to be able to know what's going on, and they want to be informed. And so when politicians are so far away, and I don't mean just physically that you're in Raleigh or you're in DC, but really that they feel disconnected from the policy maker and the knowledge base because it's become so complicated. And I believe that's not how it was intended to be, that it was supposed to have been simpler, right? That the common person could be able to understand the law and understand the impacts and that it was going to have. But there's not that education process. Civics by and large has been lost in the education system as a whole. And, it's been being replaced with, DEI education and things of that nature that, I just don't believe are truly helping our people, right? When you remove God out of the school system, when you remove God out of the court system, and you remove that moral base, that moral base, that education at your childhood foundation level, is what informed, again, your morals as you grow up and become an adult. But with that being said, now it's being replaced, with comments and thought process like, well, you've got your truth and I've got my truth.
Right.
But there's truly only one truth, right? And so with that, now whether I want to acknowledge that or you want to challenge that, that's two different issues.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that we have to have that common foundation of truth. And I believe that essentially this idea of how you treat people and treating all people equal with respect was built into the Constitution for a reason, right? And that reason had a moral basis, right? A moral biblical basis.
Mm-hmm.
That was a common thread, no matter what your particular religion might have been. They all had a moral common thread of a basis of a creator that created us all equal.
And it feels like that is being pulled away more and more rapidly as I'm getting older.
It
And
really is.
to back up a second, you said something about the president setting the tone or the leader setting the tone, right?
It's about culture.
Culture.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and I believe that's fundamentally like the basis of what that's supposed to be and look like. But I believe in today's society, that tone is no longer set by him. I believe it's more set by the media, because the media can get out there and make this person seem like they are the best thing since sliced bread,
Mm-hmm.
because they align more with said person. And this person over here is absolutely evil. And as I've gotten older, it seems like it's not even about the person anymore. It's about the letter behind the name.
Yeah.
And even their voting record or what bills they authored and passed, or some discretions they had in their past or whatever, doesn't really matter anymore. It's about that little letter behind the name. And if people would just dig deep, into those moral issues or, their moral compass and see said person or persons and what they believe in, I think they would have a much different opinion about folks that they're staunchly supporting.
A few things that just, again, point back historical, I think is really important, right? And we were all, taught growing up that if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat history. And so, there's this notion within, I believe, the two parties that the further that we get apart from each other, right, the more power and control the parties have. And so, Republicans are constantly, I'm further right than you. I'm more conservative than you, right? And so they're constantly, jumping over each other to say they're more and more and more in align with what their party is. And the same thing is true with Democrats. They're constantly saying, "Well, I'm more liberal than you."
Correct.
I'm adding to the amount of how liberal we can be.
Right.
And what that's doing is that's pulling us apart from the middle. But in the middle is where we come together.
Correct.
Right. And the correlation with that too is that if we look historically at socialism and communism and anything that gets us away from a capitalist market and economy, basically what we see is when you eliminate the middle class, that's when it makes room for socialism and communism.
Right.
And so by the two parties pulling further and further apart from each other, they're stretching us apart from the middle. They are helping to eliminate the middle class.
Absolutely.
And it's the middle class, and it's the middle of the aisle where we get the most done that's best for the country.
And I would used to say years ago, kind of what you were alluding to earlier, that the left was more that way. The left was more big government, but now I feel like the right is way more big government, and the more that they can divide and push us away from our neighbors on the left, and the more that the neighbors on the left can push it creates that big gap, like in the middle. There's, if you think about this for a moment, if our country is as bad as the media tells us, if our country is all the ists, as I call it, the ISTs, right? Why in the goodness would so many thousands and thousands of people pour across the borders to get here to such a terrible place.
We
that's a common sense approach.
we still are the best nation in the world by
Yes.
far. I mean, we have so much going for us just as a nation, and I believe in our country. I believe in our state, and I believe in our county in a manner that we have so much positive and good here in the community, and I believe that we can have so much more. That there is an opportunity for growth, and again, I go back to this idea of a biblical base of iron sharpening iron. Right, and so there is an opportunity for us through the two-party system with the independents in the middle to be able to help sharpen each other and to make for a better tomorrow. And I believe that's what our founders, when they wrote that we are in search of a more perfect union. Right? We're never going to be perfect.
Correct.
But we're in pursuit of a more perfect union, right? And it is about the pursuit of individual happiness. It's so that we can, as a people, find that place and that peace that we are seeking, right? And so all of these other things, whether it's a job, whether it's an affordable house, whether it's a place to go worship without fear of a terrorist coming in and assaulting your church, or a school. We're constantly hearing about all of these, shootings and all these different issues. Well, again, going to your point, the media just fanning that flame of the bad, the bad, the bad, and at the same time, our laws are not set up as such that they are supporting the victims, right? I've one of the notions that I've really come to abhor is that it's the criminal justice system. I love the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty,
right?
But at the same time, where is the justice for the victims?
Great point.
And
Absolutely.
so when we start looking at some of these crimes that have been perpetrated, it's years before there's any vindication for the victims.
Correct.
Right? Years. And I believe that that's wrong when it comes right down to it, that the taxpayers, oftentimes the victims, are the ones that are paying for those that have perpetrated the crime to sit in a jail or to be free on a bond to yet go create or commit more crime.
More crimes. I wonder what the statistic is for folks who are out on bail, A, commit a crime again, and B, those who have committed a violent crime who are out on bail do another violent crime. I'm sure there are statistics out there to show that. But.
There are, and we helped create a veterans treatment court here a couple of months back in Iredell County, and wrote some grants for the federal government to be able to provide the funding to support a creation of a veteran treatment court right here in Iredell County. And it's not that the veterans in particular get special treatment, but it's more of that there's additional work that they have to do that is in alignment with their experiences to be able to help them get better. Sure. Right? And it is about paying restitution, right? It is about ensuring that they're gonna have a punishment for their crime, right? However, in the process, we want to heal them so that ultimately, and throughout the process, they're not the rate of recidivism is diminished, right? That they don't come in, get a slap on the hand, and then go commit the same crime again, or commit a worse crime, right? So we know statistically that type of treatment court, right? Not just a traditional judiciary court, right? Where you're going to go in, you're going to be heard, in front of a judge, and then you're going to, be told what your punishment is, and then you're going to go out. But there are levels of expectation for treatment for the underlying condition, right? You're not just saying, okay, well, you had this crime, so we're going to punish you for it. But what caused you to go down that criminal path? You were at one time a productive citizen that had an honorable service, and then something happened that pointed you in the direction of a crime, and you committed that crime. You're going to be punished for that crime. But let's go back a step and let's figure out how to fix the underlying issue. And so the rate of recidivism is less through that type of treatment court, right? And so some of the system itself needs to be adjusted and fixed. Not just that we're putting people in jail and giving them a bond, and then while they may be paying restitution, to your point, as soon as they get out, they're committing another crime.
I can't speak to this, but you can. I can imagine what it's like to be on the battlefield, and then you come home, and then you're supposed to wake up the next day and go to your 9 to 5 job. When you're, I used to work in the emergency department as a nurse, and I'm still a nurse. And even when I would have a terrible shift, unfortunately a baby dies, someone comes in, car wreck, heart attack, whatever. There's got to be a level of decompression, because there's a point to where you're seeing these horrible things and you just have to push it down, and you can see why these high stress situations, especially a soldier, they resort to drinking when they get home, or drugs. They have no outlet. How do you come off something just so you're amped up on a 10 all the time, because you're trying to save yourself, you're trying to save your brother beside you, you're trying to save your country or whatever your mission is. And then you got to come back. You're like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to work 9 to 5 at Lowe's, or I'm going to go with the family business. Like, that has got to be, it almost seems like there should be a transition. When folks come home, there's like a program they go right into to help them decompress, to help them reorient themselves into society. Is there a program like that, or?
In the last 2 decades, there's been a lot of programs that have been developed. And you mentioned earlier, I have a radio show, Putting the Pieces Back Together. And, so I'll kind of unpack the title and then in the process speak to some of the points that you brought up. But just yesterday on our radio show, we had a group on called Warrior Expeditions, where they sponsor combat veterans to do things like hike the Appalachian Trail. So we had a combat vet with 4 tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan on the show with Sean, the CEO of Warrior Expeditions, where he's getting ready to take 6 months and go hike the entire Appalachian Trail. And essentially that program is called Walking Off the War.
Okay.
Right. And so it's about connecting with nature. It's about taking that time to reflect on your experiences, examine yourself, and then be able to leave some of that pain and leave some of that moral abuse, as I would call it, right? This idea that, I was a part, or I did, or I witnessed something that was bad, and now I want to self-punish because of those things, right? Because it didn't reconcile with how I was brought up, right? And so you this time in nature and hiking the trail helps you with that self-reflection process. And there's many programs. Another program called the Phoenix Program, very similar. It's out in Colorado and Arizona, where they hike the San Juan Hut system.
Okay.
And so it was a training ground for the special forces that was developed going into Afghanistan, where they did all their training for those missions. And so a very similar type of program. Not all programs are the same, right? They're not, one solution is not going to fit all needs.
Right.
And so we kind of bucket all the veteran population that they all had the same combat experience, right? Well, we didn't, right? There's many that maybe they were cooks, maybe they were combat arms soldiers doing infantry work, or kicking indoors, or maybe they were doing escort missions, or maybe they were base security. Maybe they were the postal clerk. Maybe they were a payroll clerk, right? There's all these different types of jobs, right? So not everybody's experience is the same, and the need in readjustment or reintegration is different. As I've come to share with people, and thus the name Putting the Pieces Back Together, it's about a puzzle analogy to understand that society is like a puzzle, and we've all put a puzzle together. Well, if I take my puzzle piece that represents John and I drop it in scalding hot coffee, is that puzzle piece ever going to look the same?
No.
Right? It's going to be swollen, discolored, distorted, and no matter how I dry it out, it's never going to fit back into the puzzle and look the same. The only way it fits back in the puzzle is if all the pieces around it make adjustments to receive it back. And that's what reintegration is truly about. And so In the process of this, it used to be that our churches and our communities and our friends and our neighbors were much more involved and much more connected to the military service, specifically prior to Vietnam. And so there's that change in becoming an all-volunteer army changed a lot of things in society and in politics that most people overlook.
Yeah.
But prior to Vietnam, we were in less than a dozen wars as a nation. Post Vietnam, we've been in over 120 wars and conflicts.
Let that sink in for a moment for the folks listening.
It's significant.
Yes.
And here's a part of the challenge. When we had the draft and the government, the politician, decided we were going to go to war and they instituted the draft, they pulled people without their consent out of the family household,
Mm-hmm.
out of their careers, out of their jobs, out of the farms and the fields, and they sent them off to war. And it had a very direct impact on the community. Not just that the nation was at war, but they took the labor force and the loved ones and sent them to war and in harm's way. When we transitioned to the draft, to the all-volunteer military, what that did was now it didn't take people out of the workforce and out of the family household without their consent and send them immediately to war.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlying consequence is now the politician that makes the decision to engage in a war or a conflict is no longer seen as accountable to that decision to send our young men and women into harm's way in such a manner that it had an immediate direct impact today in the family home.
Yeah.
And so the people don't hold the politicians so accountable, and consequently, when the military, veterans and soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines come home, they're maybe in some ways just overlooked, or they're thought, well, the government should be helping you.
Yeah.
And so the church community and the neighbors and the friends are not so involved in that reintegration process. So this is a very complex situation. And so you might ask, Brandon, well, how does state legislators get involved in this?
Yeah.
Well, the North Carolina National Guard is currently being, deployed to Texas. They're in order to support securing the Texas border alongside of the Texas National Guard, right? We have our state National Guard unit
Mm-hmm.
that falls under the leadership of the governor and the adjutant general of North Carolina.
Okay.
And the General Assembly as a whole gets some say and has some part and parcel involvement in leadership for what we can and can't do with that.
And so our governor, Roy Cooper, he, I guess, gave his blessing, said, yes, we can send our...
I've not seen the formal, but
Yeah.
I know the discussion has been happening, and they have extended support to
Okay.
the Texas governor.
So he must be on board at some level, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't be there.
That's right.
Huh.
And part of that discussion politically, it's happening too, is the president is also sending National Guard units not to work in conjunction with the Texas National Guard to secure the border, but to ensure that the border remains open. And so the stage is being set. The two parties have come apart, right? We're so divided. The media is fanning the flames.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, now our local military, the sons and daughters, moms and dads, brothers and sisters that are in our National Guard units, that are working local jobs and have careers, they're now being set in a position as pawns on a chessboard that set the battlefield for a civil war. Does our border stay open or does our border stay closed? This is one of the hottest topics across the nation. Almost every state in the nation, from California to New York, Florida to Texas, North Carolina is right in the middle, Colorado, all the way up to the Dakotas. This is a conversation that's happening across the board. Should the border just be wide open or should we have a wall? And so this is very, very important for us as a people to make certain that we're paying attention. And if you go back again and you look in history, it's the general assemblies of the states that we're making the decisions. Where do we want to fall, with the
Right.
Union or with the Confederacy?
Jeez. So now for you yourself, where do you fall in there? Do you feel like the border should be open? Do you feel like there should be a wall or a deterrent to stop folks from coming across illegally?
Great question. Appreciate that, Brandon. And I'm gonna give you an answer that I think you're probably maybe not expecting.
Okay.
But I believe, and I'll say it this way, I believe we should have a tall wall with wide gates.
Okay.
We need to be changing the conversation politically away from whether we should allow illegal immigrants or not. And the conversation should be, how do we increase the ability, the capacity for us as a nation to have legal immigration? That is the challenge, is that the system is overburdened.
Right.
And we don't have the capacity to bring people in due process legally. And so we need to increase the capacity in order that we can bring in legal immigrants. And the end result is very simple. If we have no immigration, then our nation will starve within 7 years.
Now, is that like a statistical
It is like
fact?
a real statistical fact that we have to have the immigrant labor force in order to work the farms so that we can feed ourselves.
So let me ask you this question. I have heard that. I didn't realize that was a statistical fact. But as we move further and further away from manual jobs and labor and more AI things and more robotics, at what point does that shift to where folks are coming across to do the jobs that Americans won't do, and now they can't get the jobs because manufacturing, agriculture has found that they can have machines do that instead?
Well, I'm going to change the setting of your question just a little bit. What in fact AI and science and advanced technology is really trying to do is they are bioengineering beef.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I don't like a soy burger, much less do I want to eat a bioengineered piece of meat.
I'm not looking forward to the day I have to eat Bill Gates' meat.
I'm not going to eat Bill Gates' meat.
I'm not going to.
We process our own cows.
Do you really?
We do. And I'm not going to feed bioengineered or Bill Gates meat to my children.
Right. Yeah. Not happening.
And so that is, again, it's just critical and important that we make certain that we are ultimately taking care of our future and our children. And that includes protecting the border, not just from those criminals or those bad actors that want to cross the border, but to make sure that we're bringing in good actors and good people that want to be able to acclimate into the American culture, and they're seeking their more perfect life, right? They're in pursuit of their happiness, and they're willing to contribute to our society, and they're willing to contribute into our system and pay their fair share of taxes so that ultimately we can be a sovereign nation. But if we lose our ability to feed ourselves, we will lose the sovereignty of the United States, and it'll be turned over to China or Russia or whoever it is that ultimately decides to come in and try and take us over.
Right. Boy, that's a scary thought. And I just recently learned, speaking of China, that they have bought, over 400,000 acres of property in the United States, and the majority of it is around military bases.
Not only is it around military bases, but it's been farms. And it's one thing that I'll give the General Assembly some credit for is that, North Carolina General Assembly has passed a law in restricting the sale of farmland to foreign agencies.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That was another, as we're sitting here talking about agriculture and farm, Iredell County is a huge agricultural county, and there's a lot of growth coming south up to Troutman. Obviously, Mooresville's been very developed in Iredell County, but what is it that you can do to help? Obviously, you can't stop growth, or you don't want to stop growth, but there has to be a smart way to growth.
I think it's a very interesting question. And, as a contractor and developer that spent, majority of my career in construction, I really see it, two ways that, number one, we need affordable housing. And in some ways we think about a capitalist market of supply and demand that, the more supply there is, the lower the price, is going to be. And so therefore, let's just build more houses. But I also have to think about it in a sense, again, that we have to be able to feed ourselves, right? That is connected to the sovereignty and the freedom that we enjoy. And so how do we really legislate that growth? And so a part of that is not to say or restrict the ability for somebody to sell or to build a home, but it's rather to create incentives that allow farmers and allow the next generation that's going to inherit that farm or take over that farm to be able to afford and maintain that farm. Right. And the way that we do that, the mechanism through the General Assembly to be able to do that is called the present use value tax rate, or otherwise known as the cap rate, which hasn't been adjusted in over 20 years. And so as we see increase in property values, there is if the farm is in at a certain level, whether it's forestry or whether it's cattle or agricultural, depending on what level it is, there's different uses, right? So you have to have 25 acres if you're in one category, 20 acres in another, 10 acres in another, and you can go down to as low as 5 acres. Well, with that being said, depending on what that use is, there's a formula that essentially says you're going to pay a maximum of this much tax based on your type of use, because we as a state and as a county want you to maintain use of that land in that certain way. And so I believe that if we lower that tax rate, so that we encourage and incentivize the farmers to be able to keep their farms, so that they can afford their farms, so that they can have more profits, so that they can reinvest back into the community and they can afford the rising cost of labor, then we're in effect slowing the overall growth and land use of houses over farms.
Right.
And so I think that's a key part in how we can adjust that. And there's some in the General Assembly that have a fear and concern that by opening up this conversation about lowering that one type of tax rate for our farms, then we may lose that tax rate. I don't know anybody that doesn't want to eat.
No, not a single human being doesn't want to eat.
The other side of that, another important part that I think is, important to look at in controlling the growth. We have here in our community a real issue with infrastructure, whether that's roads and bridges, both the quality and the amount of volume that these roads can handle, but also with our schools, right? And with our government centers, whether that's needing a new sheriff's office or needing a public defender's office or needing a larger courthouse, an updated courthouse, or a larger jail. There's all types of issues that come out of the state budget and out of our county budgets that need to be looked at. Well, if we're talking about growth and we're increasing the density of our county, the number of people that live in our county, and it's coming through developers coming in and building large tracts of 100, 200 to 400 homes, I believe that there should be impact fees so that the developers, instead of taking all the profits and taking them back to their state or back to their business, I believe that we should have impact fees so that ultimately when you're putting 400 homes in a community, you're going to have to build a school, because those 400 homes, if each one just has 2 kids or one kid, that's a school by itself.
Wow. So
think about it like this. How many people do you know that only have, say, 1 car? Most people have 2 cars.
Right.
So 400 homes is 800 cars that just went on the road in your neighborhood.
And that's what, those are some of the things that I think about. I haven't really thought about the school, but the schools are overcrowded for sure. But yeah, I mean, good gosh, let's say that did happen. I mean, what is the average cost to have a school that houses 1,600 kids?
Well, Weathers Creek High School is estimated at $200 million currently.
Does that seem high? I don't know. I have no idea.
It brings me to another point and concern. We recently passed a law in the General Assembly for school choice vouchers, which I think is great that parents and students can have choice in what school they go to. It used to be when we were in school, you went to the school for the district that you lived in.
That's correct.
Period.
Done.
No choice.
Yep.
I think it's good that we have a lot of diversity in our types of schools and types of education, whether it's the IB schools or whether it's the advanced early colleges. There's lots of different options here. However, the problem that I have is that when we're allowing the taxpayer dollars to go to a charter school or a private school that does not have to meet the same regulatory requirements, So, as a case in point, Weathers Creek High School, they're having to, by state law and standard for a public school, they're having to build a Q lane, the car rider pickup lane, we'll call it, right?
Yeah.
They're having to build that car rider pickup lane at a certain length, at a certain width, to certain DOT standards.
Okay.
$10 million for that portion of that $200 million school build alone.
5% is going to the car pickup lane.
However,
wow.
A private school doesn't have to build that. A charter school doesn't have to build that. So I believe that, again, going back to this idea of capitalism, if we truly want to create this notion of fair competition, then we have to level the playing field with regulations. I've had many conversations with legislators over this, and my immediate response is always to go to this. Say, hey, I love it, but we need to deregulate. And they're like, well, what are we going to deregulate? I'm like, talk about whether it's the Q lane or whether it's discipline or whether it's curriculum, whether it's testing standards, any of these things. Oh, no, we're not. We can't do that. I was like, okay, then let's put all those regulations onto the charter schools and the public schools so that we make sure that there's fair competition. No way we do that. That would ruin those schools. Here's your sign.
Well, there's your sign. Right. I'm for free choice. If the kids want to go have a better opportunity.
Absolutely.
I've sent my kids, they're in public school now. They have been in private school. And I have a lot of teacher friends, and I tell them daily. I mean, just one yesterday had to break up 2 days ago. Unfortunately, a fight. I mean, fights are going to happen, but a principal fell, hit her head, had to go to the hospital. I mean, it's a mess. I mean, things are going to happen, regardless. But I feel that when I graduated high school in 1998, I was going to go to college, and I was going to be a PE teacher, and I was going to coach baseball. And I'll never forget, my teacher told me, said, you do realize that we're the 48th lowest paid state in the United States. And you know what? That stopped me in my tracks. Because I was like, I'm not going to go to school 4 years, come out and make peanuts. And then I'm looking around and I'm going, things are kind of getting out of hand, like with discipline and stuff in 1998. It's not going to get any better. And it's gotten a lot worse. So I chose to go a different path of being a nurse and giving back and whatnot, but also it opened up many other doors for me. I could choose many different specialties to work in, and I believe I made the right choice for me. But looking back, I was just thinking, man, and there was a time not that long ago that in the state of North Carolina, a new graduate from college who was a school teacher could actually still qualify for food stamps.
Yeah,
think about that.
Just across the Virginia state line, teachers are paid almost triple what they are here in North Carolina.
You're kidding me.
I am not.
So
my wife's a school teacher, and there was a point in time where she actually looked at whether or not we should move up further north towards Pilot Mountain, because we love North Carolina. This is going to be home for us, but moving more further up north so that she could be able to work across the state line and be able to make a significantly amount more money just in her same current occupation. And we're talking just 100 miles north of us.
Wow.
Now, here's what I want you to think about, and I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but under Article 27, under the North Carolina General Statutes 115C, it dictates everything that the school superintendent here in Iredell County can or cannot do. It dictates everything from discipline to curriculum, all of which charter schools are exempt from. And so, for those that are listening, just simply do a Google search, Article 27, under North Carolina General Statutes, NCGS 115C, and just go read that.
It seems like they're handcuffed.
They are. They are absolutely handcuffed.
That doesn't seem right at all.
And so here's another piece for you, just while we're on the schools. Let's just think about something as simple as busing, right? School buses. So out of the Iredell County taxpayers, we pay roughly $1 million out of local tax dollars to the Iredell Statesville school system for fuel expenses for buses. So let's take you as an example, Brandon. You decide you want your child to go to private school. You send your child to private school. Now that's one less student on the bus, right?
Yep.
However, that bus still has to run that route to pick up whether it's 30 students or one student. We're still paying that fuel.
Right.
But now the money, the tax dollars for your child went to that private school that is not required to run a bus. Now, let's take this a step further. Let's just say you want your child to run or to go to a private school, but the private school doesn't provide a bus. How do you get your student to school if, let's say, you work 12 hours a day?
Yep.
Or let's say that in the process you don't have a car to be able to take your student to school, which there's many people in Statesville, in South Statesville,
Sure.
that may not have a personal vehicle. They
Right.
rely on a form of public transportation, which is very limited here. But there are many people that use the ICAT's transportation service. How do they get their students to that private school?
That's a good question. That's one of the questions I've had in conversation with folks who want their kids to have, let's say, a better opportunity or better learning environment going here to a charter school, private school. How do we get them there?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where it's a great idea. So how do you bring that together, or what's your solution to make this a fair playing field, so to speak?
Well, I think we first have to start with a review of all the regulations, and we really have to start digging in and figuring out what is it that the local county board of elections, county board of education needs to be focused on, and what should be their decision, what should be the local community's decision. And so I like to think about it like this. We as people know what kind of business we want to attract here, and we have to create a educated workforce in order to be able to attract those businesses here. It's not enough that we have land that a business can come build on, or that we have 2 interstates that are attractive to a business, but there has to be a local workforce to staff that business. And so we need to be able to have some input into what we're educating, in order that we can develop that workforce that is attractive for businesses to come here.
Right.
And in addition to that, we know our students, we know our children, and we know how they need to be disciplined. I personally don't want a state school superintendent or a state board of education telling our principals how or what the limits are of their ability to be able to discipline students. And so I think we need to bring back the control from the big government back down to the people at the local government.
Yep.
And that'll allow us to be able to hold them more accountable at the same time, to hold our politicians more accountable, and to be able to do what I believe is create a better quality education. And so I think that's one of the keys that we have to really focus on, and that's going to require a review of all the regulations. And I know and fully understand that not everything that's good for Iredell County is maybe not good for Mecklenburg County.
Sure.
But the truth of the matter is, what's good for Mecklenburg County is not good for us either.
That's correct.
Right? And so that's, again, where I believe the local community needs to have that control, and it should not be dictated by Raleigh what both communities have to do to meet some common standard.
You know what's interesting is there's a correlation here, what you're talking about with the regulations and the laws, the rules coming down from up top that trickle down to the superintendents or whatnot. That same mentality, believe it or not, has actually infiltrated the medical system.
It has.
And so I'm still great friends.
That's why my daughter decided she didn't want to, halfway through college, she decided she was not going to become a nurse.
Really?
Simply because of the mask mandates, and the fact that, from the federal government to the state government now all of a sudden started requiring not only masks but vaccine, and that's her choice.
Sure.
That's your choice.
Well, we used to think we had a choice.
That's right.
But not so much in that, but also to what the physician, like an emergency department physician, that is a big business. So if a patient comes in with complaint A, there's actually like an algorithm they're supposed to follow.
Yep.
And if they deviate from that, they have to basically justify why they've deviated from the plan. And if the patient says, look, doc, you've said A, B, C, and D, can't find out what's wrong, I don't want to stay in the hospital tonight, I want to be discharged. And I'm speaking from personal experiences from 2 months ago. Well, they have to actually report that up the chain as to why the patient wasn't admitted, and it was a patient's decision, and they did A, B, C, and D. And so I went back to and had dinner with some ER physician buddies of mine, and because now these new docs are coming out, they're not given the opportunity to actually think critically. If it's not following the algorithm or the chart, I don't know what to do.
You know,
It's taking away critical thinking, common sense, or, a doctor who's been in the emergency department for 25, 30 years and who has seen things. They're handcuffing them on their ability to actually practice medicine.
I'll take this down two paths that I think is relevant and critical for us in our thought process and conversation. Number one, I completely agree with you. And this goes back to this conversation we had earlier about Bill Gates and bioengineered meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a form of population control.
Sure.
Right? Because it goes back to this thought process. The algorithm is going to spit out X number of positive results and Y number of negative results. And we accept the number of negative results, right? That's acceptable by those in ultimate power and big government and in control, whether it's through the pharmaceutical industry or any other industry connected to the medical industry. And so with that, I think that's something that needs to be adjusted, right? I personally would love to see us get back to the days where doctors made house calls. I think that medicine was better then.
Absolutely.
Right? Service was better then. Bedside manner was better then. We had relationships with the doctors. And so I'm going to take that, down this other path too, that ultimately, I had a half sister that passed away due to COVID, and in the process, it came down that she tested positive at home. She had a cough, she had a headache, she couldn't smell, she was having some respiratory challenges, but the doctor said, well, check your oxygen. And, at the time her oxygen was relatively high, somewhere around 95 or so, and said, take some vitamins and, isolate yourself. Well, she had only one kidney. And in the process, she ultimately becomes septic and then passed away from sepsis. And so, and this all took place in a matter of about 7 days.
Right.
Because they wouldn't allow her to be seen in the office. If they would have seen her in the office and they would have reviewed her chart and they would have spent time with her, then she would still be here today. But it's the algorithm and the way that we care for people is you're just a number, and let's just push you through and see as many as we can. So because that's what the insurance company told us to do.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what the government told us we should do. And we got to get away from that. And we need that critical thinking. And to another point, I got a call here on my way over to meet with you this morning, and a good friend down in Florida, his fiance was just diagnosed with breast cancer, and go to the doctor, and the doctor immediately says, okay, well, it's stage 3, and we're going to go through these steps. We're first going to do chemo and try and shrink it, then we're going to do surgery to remove it, and then we're going to go into the regimen of radiation, and your odds are X.
Yep.
And so I called him and I said, hey buddy, I said, listen, I said, about 7.5 years ago, I got a friend that, he was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. And in the process, they told him the same thing. And he went to Duke University, and they said, well, basically we want to go in and we want to cut it out for this type of cancer. First, we're going to go in and we're going to remove the tumor, and then we're going to radiate, and then we're going to put you on chemo. And him and his wife are like, we've been through this, regimen before with a type of back cancer in his back that had attached to his spinal cord. And so we got to doing some research. We found a hospital in Mexico called CHIPSA, and CHIPSA provides a type of treatment, a immunotherapy type of treatment, and they use a product called Coles. And Coles is a type of injection that the FDA hasn't approved, but it essentially teaches the body and the cells in the body how to fight the cancer. Duke University gave him 18 months to live. It's now been over 7 years.
That's
and he's
fantastic.
100% cancer free. Duke has been watching him, and he goes every 6 months to have MRIs at Duke because they are so amazed. Duke's paying for the MRIs because they don't understand. And the whole point of this is that the FDA is not approving this treatment that we know cures cancer.
Yes. I can speak to you off camera about some other things.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's big government.
Well, yeah, it's big government. It's big pharma. There's medical
They've
device.
become one and the same.
They are. They are one of the
And
same.
we got to get these industries pulled apart and the power back in the people's hands. And the only way that's going to happen is if they go out and they vote, and not just vote in the general election, but vote in the primaries.
That's right.
Get educated about your candidates. Understand who their relationships are with, and who's funding them, and who's paying for their campaigns.
No, you're exactly right. People do have to get out and vote, and every vote does matter. Two things I wanted to touch on real quick. We're talking about the big divide between our citizens in the country, and there's going to be the haves and the have-nots, and that is getting closer and closer to happen. And you said something that I'm surprised. It does happen now, but it's going to be a bigger industry, and that's going to be concierge medicine. I've actually worked on the concierge medicine side for a while, but you're going to see to where if the Gallina family or the Crouch family can pay Dr. Jim $10,000 a year, and all Dr. Jim needs is 100 patients that pay him $10,000 a year, he's going to make $1 million, and he can write your prescription. He can come evaluate you. He can send you out to go get your lab work done. But Dr. Jim comes to your house.
Do you have Dr. Jim's phone number?
I have a lot of Dr. Jims.
Oh, okay.
But that's going to happen. But it's going to be, yes, you still have your insurance, but instead of me going through this whole churn of the government system or the insurance racket, I'm just going to pay him, and then we're going to, I can be seen. He can see my kid. He can see,
Many people are paying $10,000 a year in their insurance already.
And what are they getting out of it?
Nothing.
Exactly. So why not pay that to somebody who can actually come and see you and do those things? So I think that's going to be something in the future that is going to be more and more popular.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, before we wrap everything up, you served and you are a Purple Heart recipient. Mm-hmm. What type of injury did you receive?
So essentially, we were doing a route clearance into Fallujah, just to kind of give you set the stage. And in the process, we had about a 30-mile road that we had to clear. There had been 18 landmines had went off on that road in the week prior, and our job was to ensure that the route was safe to get some fuel tankers into Fallujah. And so we got in a Humvee and we drove the 30-mile road and looking for landmines. And on the way back up the road back to our base is when we hit 2 landmines, and ultimately shrapnel in my arm, my leg, and my head was split open, back and neck injuries, and I was unconscious for about 45 minutes, and all of which just resulted in a traumatic brain injury.
So you have a TBI. I have a TBI.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got hit in the back of the head with a pickaxe and it crushed my skull when I was 16. Oh, wow. So I've got a metal plate back here.
Wow.
Yeah, it used to be a party favorite. I'd walk by the microwave in school and pee my pants. No, I'm kidding. That never happened.
I figured people just called you a metalhead. But okay.
Well, they've called me a lot.
Yeah. It's funny. I'll tell you, my wife is a school teacher, and so in the process, you have to have that kind of self-effacing humor, and when dealing with injuries like that. And so the family joke is my wife married me because she was teaching EC at the time, and I was her lifelong project. And so but a lot of therapy, a lot of had a lot of speech therapy. I had, that was really the biggest part, was the aphasia, just a lot of anger, and had to go through and learn how to control that. And, really got to a place where I could respect people with disabilities in a much different way, going through a process of being somewhat normal. Those that maybe went to school with me might not say I was normal, but being somewhat normal and deploying into combat, and then coming home with these injuries, and both physical and mental, having to learn to cope with them, essentially a decade of therapy, and I do a lot better today.
I didn't have to go through therapy as much per se, but I definitely had short temper anger for about 2 years, and permanent short-term memory loss. But yeah, you had to, I had to teach almost, I was a guy, I wouldn't say I had a photographic memory. Well, yeah, I mean, I could memorize a stack of baseball cards and tell you their height, their weight, what position they
Wow.
played, their statistics and stuff like that. But then I had to reteach myself sticky notes. Man, I lived by sticky notes, especially in
Yep.
college, nursing school.
I should have bought a stock in sticky notes.
Yes,
Yeah.
because if it wasn't on the sticky
Yep.
note, man, I was not. It wasn't going to happen.
I remember I picked up a lady at the airport. She was flying in to help us with our charity, and I picked her up in my truck, and across the dash was a row of sticky notes.
Yeah.
And she gets in the truck, and she's like, "What is this?" It's like, well, if I don't write it down, I'm liable not to remember, and so I write everything down.
Have to.
And I'm a lot better about that now. And in fact, the VA actually, the therapy device they gave me was at the time an iPod, and I started using that as my calendar and my notes and those sorts of things, and so that really made a big difference. And so I use that technology aid now to be able to help me, and really easy, just voice to text type notes.
Yes,
just can set an alert, a reminder, and those types of things, and it makes life a lot easier. But the retention, the further I go along, has gotten better,
right,
and continues to improve. A lot of reading and just helping to build the word recall ability to help fight against the aphasia. That's the biggest thing.
For me, isn't it amazing what you can remember and what you forget?
Yeah. It is.
My wife will look at me and goes, "How can you remember that? But yet you have no idea what I told you to get at the grocery store." And she gets so annoyed because I'll say, "Text me what you want." Because I'm going to remember like 2 of those items.
Yep.
And she's like,
exactly the same.
Yep. So that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's been a long road, and I attribute all of my success. Number one, God's blessing and His grace. Number two, just my wife is just absolutely phenomenal, and then our community as a whole, our church family, and so many of our friends and neighbors that have just rallied and come alongside to be able to help support and encourage, and it's amazing to me. And one of the things that I've witnessed through our work with the charity is that when somebody does something to help you, and it creates a little bit of an inspiration to pay it forward.
Yep.
And that's what my life has been. It's been so many good people that have come along and supported and come alongside and helped me grow and helped me become the person I am.
Absolutely.
I just want to pay it back forward just a little bit.
Yeah. It's nice to have people rally around you and support you. And also, when you're doing something that has a positive impact, people see that. And people actually are drawn to that, and they want to help. There's a lot less naysay. There's always going to be naysayers, of course.
Yeah.
That always question your motivation or your motives or why you're doing something. But it's good to see people out there doing good stuff in the community and doing it for the right reasons.
I believe, and I said this earlier, we live in the greatest country in the world. And I don't believe it's because of the dirt. I don't believe it's because of the blue sky, although North Carolina has the bluest sky.
That's right.
I don't believe that it has anything to do with the land itself. It has to do with the heart of the people, the culture of the people,
right.
And that we have people that truly do love each other, and they truly are trying to pursue happiness, and they're willing to help one another, and being able to do that. And for that, even as a nation, you think about all that our nation does to help other nations. I think we epitomize that of loving our neighbor as we love ourselves.
And in the vein of giving back and whatnot, you and Dale Beatty started Purple Heart Homes. So could you talk about that briefly, kind of where you started, where you are, but what the vision is for the future?
Yeah, essentially, Dale, in the same accident, I was engineering. We were sitting side by side. He lost both legs below the knee, and in addition to just literally hundreds of pieces of shrapnel, throughout his body, and broken arm, and nose, face bones. Just the way the blast hit our vehicle had a significant more impact on his body than mine. But in the process, after a year in Walter Reed, he needed a home to be built for his family. And I was building houses at the time. Just fell right back into construction after we returned home, and so we're kind of, we were great friends before. We served together all total before he passed. We served together for a little over 20 years. And in the process, we talked daily while his house was being built. And I went and volunteered on the house and did the interior trim and hung the doors. And so I'm seeing and witnessing all these great people in the community coming out and supporting, donating, volunteering, helping. And at the end of the project, we were sitting there, and he had played some music for all the guests that were there, that all the volunteers. And we said, man, look at all these Vietnam veterans. I wonder who's helping them. And so we got to doing some research, and we said, hey, there's nobody really out there helping the Vietnam veterans. And so we had these experiences, Dale, in the hospital at Walter Reed, where Vietnam vets and Korean vets were coming through the hospital and visiting and offering encouragement to him. When I returned home and first landed in Bangor, Maine at 1 o'clock in the morning in February, there were 7 Vietnam veterans that were there to welcome us home. And then we, connect down through Richard's Coffee Shop, and there's all these Vietnam veterans that are, we're seeing that are fighting to make sure that the Iraq generation of veterans and Afghan generation of veterans were not being treated the same way that they were getting the benefits, and they were fighting for us, but nobody was fighting for them.
Right.
And I'd had some experiences with a house that I was building where, a client, as we're closing the house, they're waving the check in my face, and upset because I wasn't wanting to do something a certain way that they wanted it done. And I remember going home and telling my wife, I said, so I think I want to, change jobs and do something different. She said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I want to work for people that can't write me a check. And she said, honey, I think that brain injury is getting worse.
I've been told that.
And so in the process, Dale and I got together and we're like, there's nobody helping Vietnam veterans. Vietnam veterans have done so much for us. I don't want to build houses just for a paycheck. Let's start a charity to build houses and renovate houses for disabled veterans, all generations. And so that's how it came about. And as of today, we've invested over $42 million into veteran housing across the country. We've built and renovated houses from Alaska all the way to Puerto Rico. And we have, more than a dozen chapters, over 200 full-time volunteers, 35 staff members, and we're a growing national charity. And we were identified as one of the top 8 national housing charities for veterans. We've platinum seal of transparency through GuideStar, 4-star rating with Charity Navigator.
Wow.
We've got a great team. We're now manufacturing tiny houses that we've sent to Mississippi and South Carolina, Georgia, and Kentucky, and of course here in North Carolina as well. And we're just trying to do our part to make sure that, number one, veterans have a safe place to call home, that it's an accessible and healthy home, and that it's affordable. And so we're trying to do our part and just simply be a vessel that the community and volunteers can get engaged with to be able to put action to their words of thank you for your service.
And so the goal is just to continue to grow this continuously. Man, congratulations. It's a huge impact. Everyone here in Iredell County knows Purple Heart Homes for sure. And you've also, you're linked and working with the Military Makeover Show with Montel, right?
We're the official nonprofit partner for Military Makeover, and so we've done multiple shows with them. Most recently, we did a project here for the Bowman family in Statesville. It was a phenomenal project. I met those guys about 10 years ago on a project in Jacksonville, Florida, where they came out and filmed one of our projects there. And we've done, I don't know, half a dozen or so different television series.
Yeah.
And Military Makeover is just one that their culture and their core beliefs closely align with ours. And so we've partnered up with them to help be able to inspire and spread the word. And most recently we had President Bush had joined us on one of the shows and come out and supported that project. And we've constantly engaging with the local community leadership to be able to just build the word and get the word out to people and let them know that there are people that are in need. There's a way for them to be able to get engaged and support. Every dollar, every moment of time, all matters, and it really changes the life of the family and the individual when you give of your time and your talents to be able to say that I see you, I hear you, and you matter. I'm willing to give up something that is a precious commodity that we all have a limit to.
Wow, that's powerful because people want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's so many people out there that don't. They feel like they're not. Well, man, thank you for everything that you do for the community. Good luck. Before I'll let you out of here, though, a couple rapid fire questions.
All right, let's hear it.
Are you ready? Favorite movie of all time?
Oh my gosh. Favorite movie of all time, I'm going to say Top Gun.
Oh, it's a great one. The new one or the old one?
I like the new one a lot better.
Do you really?
A lot better.
Jeez, all right.
Yeah. It's one of the few, sequels that I think was a vast improvement.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you do a part 2 or a sequel, it's never as good as the first one, right? But yeah, it was good. But I don't know. I'm an original guy.
Yeah.
All right, favorite band of all time or artist?
Oh, I'm gonna have to say Outlaw 2-1, Dale and Eric and Tommy and Steven and all those guys. I've been fortunate to know a lot of national stars. Rocky Lynn is certainly one of my favorites. Darius Rucker's on the top of the list, but I'm a local boy.
I'm gonna have to look them up.
And let me just tell you, it was Dale Beatty's band.
Okay.
And we just signed with New Folk Records to put out a national release of their last CD that they produced before Dale passed, just a few months before he passed, and so that'll be coming out here before the end of the year.
Okay,
we've already signed the contract.
When that does, let us know. We'll help spread the word on that. That's awesome.
Right.
Wow. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I figured say Celine Dion. Favorite book of all time.
Favorite book of all time. I'll tell you, my favorite book I've read a dozen times, and it's called The Fisherman, and it's a first person writing by a preacher in Alaska. He's since passed away. Huntsberger, I think is how you say his name, but The Fisherman is written as the story of Peter and Peter's walk with Christ. And while you may have read the Bible story, it's written in a third person perspective. And so this first person perspective is a way that is very personal, and you read it as if you are Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular book has had a tremendous impact on me and just how I view my own personal walk with Christ.
The Fisherman.
Yep, The
Fisherman.
Fisherman.
Check that one out.
Yep.
Okay. Favorite place to vacation?
Ooh. Wow. I've been really fortunate to travel the world and see so much of our own country here, and we've got some beautiful places in America, but I got to say the one place I always go back to and just I thank God I have the opportunity to be there is Iredell County and just being home. I spent 143 days on the road traveling last year, just for the charity, and spent weeks in Arizona, weeks in Texas, weeks in Florida, weeks in Puerto Rico, and all beautiful places,
right.
all great places. Hawaii is a wonderful place, but when you got to fly for 12 hours to get there, it's not so fun. Alaska is the same way. If I'm going to go to one of those places, I'm going to want to stay for a month, right. Get over the jet lag, and
So we're the same.
Make it worthwhile.
Home,
but yeah, home. I love coming home, and if I can just spend a week at home, 2 weeks at home doing nothing.
Yep.
And just be with my family.
It's
the best place for me to be.
All right, last question. Dead or alive, you can have dinner with 2 people. Who are they?
Oh, 2 people. That's probably the toughest question you've asked.
Thank you. Save the best for last.
I would, certainly my grandfather was probably one of those people that, I would um, just one more meal with him just to.
Yep.
So many life lessons that you heard, but you didn't get the chance to apply. That's so he passed when I was 15. So certainly him. Somebody alive, I would have to say.
They don't have to be alive. They could be dead as well. It's your
yeah,
table.
Well,
You invite who you want.
My table, I can invite who I want. Wow, that's really tough. I don't know that I've ever really thought about that question, but I would. I don't know. We might have to come back and revisit that one.
The beauty about that question is I love the fact that you can't answer it because a lot of people haven't really thought of it before, and it really just came to me to ask you that question. But it means that you have to come back for a part 2.
Perfect. I'm happy to come back.
Well, man, tell everybody where they can find you on social media or your website, how they can learn more about you or in your campaign or even Purple Heart Homes.
Yeah. So number one, you can just go to Google or DuckDuckGo, wherever you choose to do your search engine work at, and you can just Google John Gallina, and I'll be one of the top, response pull-ups. And there is a family member that's a retired CFO now that he might come up. That's not me. He's much older, but just check it out. You can further, cultivate that out and say John Gallina Purple Heart, and you'll be able to find some information there. Certainly on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, you can find me there. You can go to Purple Heart Homes website at phhusa.org if you'd like to get involved in supporting veterans. We have a great team that is leading that charge, and I know that they would love to have your support and involvement, and plenty of need. We got over 1,400 veterans in our application pipelines. There's lots of opportunity all across the country. You can learn more about my campaign for North Carolina House District 84 by going to Gallina4, F-O-R, Gallina4nc.com, and the same, you can just go on to Facebook and Instagram and be able to find our campaign sites there, and we appreciate your support. Please go out and vote March 5th in a primary if you live in Iredell County. It's very, very important that everybody goes out and votes. Don't care who you vote for. I would appreciate your vote, but what I care about most is that you extend your voice. That's what we fought for, was that you have a right to choose, and I appreciate y'all and listening to us today. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming in. Thanks, everybody. Go vote. See ya. Bye. Enjoy it, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Oh.